Hello and welcome to the Wormhole Podcast. This is the third of a few Milestone episodes to celebrate episode 100. These are different to the usual episodes. We're talking casually and there's more than one author. You can consider this a party. So, I'm your host Charlie Place, and today I am joined by three authors who all write in different genres. Yep, we're mixing it up this time. They're going to introduce themselves so that you can get an idea for their voices straight away.
Hello, my name is Elissa Soave. As you can probably tell, I'm Scottish, so I'll be easily distinguishable from the other guests. I have written a book called Ginger and Me, which is about the story of a friendship between two young working-class Scottish girls. My next novel is called Graffiti Girls, and it's due out in November.
Hi, my name's Jenni Keer. I have written 6 novels, and nobody is more surprised than me by that. My first 2 were contemporary, I hesitate to say romance, they had a romance in them, but contemporary commercial women's fiction. But my last 4 have been historical. I've embraced my love of history, and I would describe my books as historical but with a twist. So quite often a little bit of a spin on something, maybe a magical realism element or twisting reality a little bit. My latest book is At the Stroke of Midnight, which came out on March the 12th. And yeah, very happy author here with lots more books on the horizon.
Hi, I'm Chloe Timms. You might know me from my debut novel, The Seawomen, or my podcast, Confessions of a Debut Novelist. The Seawomen came out in June 2022 in the paperback in May last year, and it is a speculative novel described as The Shape of Water meets The Handmaid's Tale, and it's about a young woman named Esther who lives on a island cult, and she is trying to navigate that lifestyle but has a longing to leave and explore the outer world.
So, first question, what is your genre and what does your genre do effectively? What does it do and what's it for, if that makes sense? Do you want to go first, Elisa?
Well, if anybody could see this, you would see my face looking on in horror. Genre. Now, I'll be quite honest with you, that's a word that I didn't use at all when I was writing my novel, and in fact haven't even thought about as a hugely voracious reader for years. I wouldn't say that I have a particular genre that I like to read, or even now a genre that I write in. When I submitted my novel to my publisher, they told me that I had written a cross-genre novel, part mystery, part coming of age. And I thought, how clever of me. I have written a cross-genre novel. But it was completely news to me. So this whole idea of genre and writing to a genre and writing within a genre, I don't think it's anything to do with the writer particularly. I think we just write the stories that we want to write. And in terms of defining where they fit, what genre do they fit into, I think that's for the marketers and the people who sell the book. It's just really a way of placing it so that the reader can find whatever it is they're looking for. For me as a writer, I certainly don't write to a genre or attempt to write to a genre. I don't know if it's different for you guys.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, actually, Elissa. I think that's been, I was going to say part of my problem, not necessarily that it's a problem, but I do write cross-genre, so it has been difficult. For example, when I've been nominated for awards, my publisher struggled to think what category to put me in because there is the magical realism element. So, you know, is it like a little bit of paranormal or whatever, or there's the romance, there's always a romance, but now there's the historical. And At the Stroke of Midnight, which was heavily influenced by my love of Agatha Christie, is actually a cosy crime. So, I mean, bring it on. I've practically covered every single genre in one book. And you're absolutely right. I think it's the publisher and the bookseller and the librarian who need to be able to display their wares, as it were. I mean, you go into a bookshop and you want to read a book, say you wanted a romance, for example, you need to know where to go in the bookshop to find that. So I absolutely understand. Or if you're looking online for a book, you need to know how to refine your search to look for the type of books you're interested in. So I absolutely understand that, but I think you're right. Authors, we don't think like that. We write the stories that need to be told, or we feel inside us need to be told. But yes, I mean, we do have to tick various genre boxes in order to market our books. But I think it sounds like you, Elissa, have the same issue as me. We're ticking more than one box.
I had a similar issue with my novel because It is speculative. It's exploring a society in the future, but there's a slight sort of fantastical element as well. But it's not a fantasy novel, and I didn't want it to be marketed as a fantasy novel because I'm not someone who reads a lot of fantasy, so it would feel wrong for that book to be placed in that category for me. And I think it would probably disappoint the fantasy readers as well when they picked it up. I always remember my agent giving me some really interesting food for thought when I met her, and she said, if you're going to a book festival, let's say, who would be on the same panel as you? If there was a theme that you were discussing, who would be sat next to you? And that was a really interesting way for me to think about where my book would be placed, rather than necessarily speaking of genre or category of book. It's kind of who are the authors that you are not trying to emulate, but people who you think share the same space as you. And I think as well that shifts because if you have a favorite author, unless they're writing the same book all the time and are just kind of churning out loads of books that kind of have similar titles and similar themes, they're bound to explore different avenues because I don't know about you two, but I don't want to write the same thing all the time. I want to explore different avenues and think, what am I interested in now? What books are inspiring me? What have I seen or heard or experienced myself that has made me want to explore different avenues? And have kind of tried, haven't published like Jenni lots of different genres, but I have experimented with different things. But I guess there are always genres where we think, that's not for me, I couldn't do that. I was speaking to a crime author this morning, and the way she was telling me how intricate her plotting has to be, I was like, not for me. Can't do that. Don't have a brain for that.
Who were the people that you would have said you'd be on a panel on? With, I mean, sorry.
Oh, goodness me. It's a long time ago, Charlie. You're asking me to, go through the recesses of my mind. I
expect you to remember these things. I'm sorry.
Well, one of my favourite novelists is Kirsty Logan, brilliant Scottish author who writes kind of slightly weird fiction, sometimes slightly exploring the kind of fairy tale. And she was actually a mentor for me when I wrote my first novel, Seawomen, and gave me amazing advice. I think to be on a panel with her would be my absolute dream. Obviously, I said Margaret Atwood because The Handmaid's Tale was a huge, huge influence on me. Although being on a panel with Margaret Atwood, I mean, that's kind of dream fantasy level. She's not going to turn up to the same book festival as me, let's be honest.
You wouldn't be able to speak. You'd be like, oh.
I wouldn't. I think that novel, I mean, I'll just be honest, and this will probably stop Margaret from ever appearing with me ever again, but wasn't keen on the sequel, I have to say. But the original is incredible. Like, it was such a formative novel for me when I was at school. And so, yeah, probably Margaret Atwood. There's so many people now that I just think, and I'm one of these people that when I read an amazing book, I don't sit there and go, I'm never going to be this good. Like, it doesn't upset me because I read that novel and think, I want to be this good. I want these authors to think, oh, okay, this person's got something. And other novelists that I kind of looked up to, it's more because I just think, oh, I would love to be as good as you, really. That's what I'm thinking in my mind.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you talk about that you think about other authors and you think, oh, to be as good as them. I genuinely try not to think about other authors at all because one of the things that really hampered me when I first started writing was this idea that, I'd read a really good book or have an author that I really, really looked up to, and I would try to write like them. And so initially that meant for me that I was trying to write the most impressive words I could possibly use. The Roger Thesaurus was never off my desk. I thought I had to write about posh people, certainly not Scottish people, doing exciting things in big, exciting cities, because that's the kind of book that I was reading. And doing that meant that anything that I wrote was a sort of second-rate version of what I was really liking. When I'm writing, I try not to think of other authors. I try to remember that, my voice is my voice, and I really just want to try and be as authentic to my own voice as I can. And I found that when I was thinking about other authors and books that I loved, it was really hampering any sort of authenticity I had, because I couldn't help but compare myself and think, well, my voice is just really not that great in comparison to those voices, so I really can't use my own voice. But of course, you have to use your own voice.
I wonder partly whether it's a kind of imposter syndrome, lack of confidence, where I almost feel like I see those books as like, I don't know, sustenance or drink. And I will, when I'm feeling very not very confident in myself, or if I have like a a moment where I just think I can't write, or my writing is just very flat and awful, I will pick up a book by an author that I love, and I'll almost drink it down as if to say, like, that's my sustenance to keep me going, rather than necessarily take on their voice. But I know what you're saying. I know people that said that as a child they wanted to be a writer, and they'd be reading, like, I don't know, Dickens, and suddenly their writing would turn into some sort of Victorian prose, you know?
It's finding your own voice, and I think that's something we definitely do when we're starting out. We're emulating our heroes, aren't we? But it's fake somehow, and you do find your own voice eventually and realise what people are talking about when it's genuinely coming from you. But again, going back to how publishers market us, you know, they will do this list, like Chloe said, if you enjoyed Lucinda Riley, you will enjoy whatever. And I always find that quite amusing and quite flattering when they list the authors that they're comparing me to. My latest book was described as Rebecca meets Agatha Christie meets Groundhog Day, and I thought, oh yes, it is a bit, but I don't think I'd been conscious of that. The Agatha Christie, yes, but I don't think I'd sort of necessarily been conscious of that when I was writing it. So yeah, I think it's them trying to market your book, which is their job at the end of the day. Yeah.
So if you wrote in another genre, and I know we've been discussing genre, but go this one, which would it be?
Can I answer that in a genre I definitely would not ever write in, and that's historical. I know, Jenny, you've got historical books. I mean, to me, the level of research that is required for that is off the scale. I mean, you hear people talk about, I think it was Hilary Mantel I heard being interviewed, and she was saying, you know, she might do research for like 4 or 5 days and then use half a sentence. I mean, to me, that is just off the scale. I couldn't even contemplate it. So I'm hugely admiring of historical novelists, but I could never, ever do it.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And you heard me say at the beginning of this podcast that the first 2 novels I wrote were just sort of contemporary women's fiction. And it's precisely for that reason, Elissa. I just didn't think I was clever enough to write historical. I just thought it's going to involve so much research. I do have a history degree, incidentally, but it's one thing reading history and it's another thing writing it. And it does. She's absolutely right. I mean, it takes me, I can research for 2 hours to write 1 sentence. I kid you not. And it's knowing whether the person can walk into the room and switch on an electric light. It's knowing how long a journey might take. It's knowing what they're wearing, which obviously when you're writing something contemporary, or in Chloe's case, maybe something a little bit more sort of not of this world, if you're creating your own world, if you're world building, for example, then you can make that stuff up. So, yeah, I was slow to write historical because of that. And in fact, the first novel where I did that, which was The Secrets of Hawthorn Place, I did as a dual time, almost to dip my toe in and think, can I do this? I'll just do a little bit of historical and see if I can get away with it. And it was so well received that I sort of followed on from that. So, yes, I've had a lot of people say to me writing historical is quite the challenge. And it does take me perhaps longer to write my books than some of my author friends. I would say if I was going to write a different genre, Charlie, it would be crime. But there would kind of be a caveat on that, because it would be the cosy crime and not police procedurals or whatever. For exactly the same reason, if it's something that you don't feel confident writing about, if you don't have that level of knowledge, I mean, obviously there are things that you can research, know what you write, not necessarily write what you know. But I would like to write crime because I think it's just such fun to read. I'm all about the twist.
I'm going to use this podcast as a bit of an accountability for myself because I am writing. I'm kind of writing 2 books at the moment, but I'm having fun experimenting in a different genre for me, which is a romantic comedy, and very, very different from anything I've ever written before. But it's a book that is really important to me, and I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't know whether it's going to happen yet, because obviously it's, who knows what the future holds, but it's something I'm really excited to write. I'm having real fun with it. I get to be funny, which I don't get to do in my other books, so that's kind of entertaining to kind of think about how to make things funny and, write witty dialogue and let my characters have a nice time rather than put them through torturous times like I normally do. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. And as I said, I'm using this as a accountability because I know this episode is going live a few months after we record. So hopefully by the time this goes out, I should have something to show for it. Let's hope so anyway.
If not, I suppose I can go on Instagram and say, X number of months ago, Chloe, you said this. X number of months ago.
And she didn't do it. Yeah. But no, let's hope so. It's difficult because when your readers expect a certain thing from you, it feels sometimes a bit daunting to suddenly go, do you know what, I really fancy coming and go at something else. But I'd like to think that people who know me or people who have followed me kind of online or are interested in what I do will find this book really interesting because it has certain kind of parallels with my own life. And so I always think it's putting yourself into your books is important. We do it all, whether we do it consciously or not anyway, we always put ourselves into our books a bit. But yeah, you can nag me if this episode comes out and you haven't heard anything about what I'm writing, then please feel free to come and tell me off and say, why aren't you writing?
I'm going to come onto your writer's sprint club and say, well, Chloe, you're here. How much have you written?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think you brought up an important point about brand, actually, about what the reader expects. And again, somewhere where I've not necessarily conformed, it is that if you pick up a book with Agatha Christie on the spine, you know what you're going to get in that book, don't you? And I think there's an expectation with publishers as well that you will be producing more of the same with your books because they like to brand you. You know, what is brand Jenni Keer? Or she writes this, you know, this is the genre that she writes and this is the style she writes and this is what you can expect from a story. And I'm currently writing a book that's got quite a lot to do with witchcraft. You know, I'm springing about all over the place. And that I've been really lucky to kind of get away with. And also with my publishers, not had to have pseudonyms because quite often they'll want you to tweak your name or write under another name if you're changing genre. Yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting point you were raising. It's about that brand and about what readers expect.
Look at Hilary Mantel. I mean, she was the absolute queen of reinvention. You know, she did autobiography, historical, obviously, is what she became, you know, best known for latterly. But, you know, her early novels are really black contemporary humour. It's not that I wouldn't change genres. I don't really think I can. I can't really imagine myself writing, particularly historical. I can't imagine myself writing anything like that. But I like to think anyway, I don't feel constrained as to what I could write. I think if I wanted to write something, I would. I would write it and then, you know, just to see how the land lay.
I actually have a question that I added to this yesterday that I think actually might be quite fitting for this episode. I'm going to ask you all, how is your social media strategy? You've been talking about marketing.
You so make it sound like we've all got business plans and folders and charts and
You may well do, I'm not sure.
I am just, well, I'm a Twitter, I refuse to give it its false name, addict. I love Twitter, basically because I'm a chatty person, I'm a nosy person, I like to know what's going on in people's lives, and I'm more of a writing person than I am photography or taking videos or anything. So for me, Twitter is my haven, and I used it before I became published. I used it years ago. I think I had started an account in 2008. Well, not the account I've got at the moment, but an old account, which was 2008. So I've been on it for a long time. I just love it. I just spend far too much time scrolling and clicking on hashtags and all the rest. But it's mainly just because I'm a chatty person and I'm a nosy person. I like to hear what other writers are up to. My strategy is really just use it for whatever I want. I don't really think about it too much. I think one thing that I would say, if you are a writer starting out or you haven't been published or anything, being part of the community is a fun thing. But also, if you don't enjoy social media, then just don't worry about it. Like, really just ignore it. If you're not interested in it, do not bother, because people will be able to spot that you're not using it genuinely. You want to be able to have conversations on there. If you follow book bloggers, follow people who are reviewing books or people who just love books, or follow other writers and just chat to them. Like, I don't mind if people talk to me who I have no idea who they are. I'm not, unless you write something inappropriate, I'm probably going to reply to you or thank you or whatever it is. I don't have a strategy. It's literally just be myself, probably post too much about my life. I wouldn't go into like graphic details about personal things, but just show people a glimpse of everyday life, things I'm interested in. But it's not really, I can't remember the last time I posted about my book, which is probably really bad. My publisher's probably not so happy about that. But I just think actually if people get to know you, they're probably interested in you as a person. And just going, my book, my book, my book is not going to sell copies anyway. So my strategy is just be myself, really. That's about it.
I would say I had very little interest in social media until the writing became an important part of my life. And I very quickly realised, particularly because my first book deal, because it was a digital first book deal, I quickly realised that, and it's still true to this day, that the majority of my sales, 95% or in excess of 95% of my sales, is going to be ebook, Kindle product. Then my audience is online. So I have to engage with them, and that's where I'm going to find them to engage with them. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I'm a very chatty, personable person in real life. I'm the sort of person that starts talking to the checkout assistant, much to whichever son happens to be doing the weekly shop with me, much to their horror. I just embark on a conversation with the person next to me on the bus. You know, I love that. So to transfer that onto social media, that's great. That's no issue for me. But also there's a side where there's sometimes I really don't feel like it. It is a bit, as a very good friend of mine, another author, Ian Wilfrid, said, it's a bit tits and teeth. And sometimes you just don't feel like that. And it's a false view that you're putting out. I'm not taking Instagram photos of the corner of my bedroom where all my dirty laundry is piled up. You know, I'm arranging flowers and putting my book in front of a lovely vase to make it look beautiful. And that takes effort. And it takes effort sometimes to be cheery and to do the little videos that might say my publisher might have asked, oh, can you do a 1 minute video? And sometimes I really don't feel like that. Sometimes there's things going on in my life that are hard. And I step away from social media because it becomes another pressure. It becomes another thing to do. And for a busy person, it's not my priority. So I think it is important if you're an author. I mean, the publishers often say it's not essential, but I do think it is important for the reason I said at the beginning. But yeah, you've got to want to do it, and you only put as much of yourself out there as you want to. You shouldn't feel pressure to be on it.
I don't have a social media strategy. The only social media that I've ever engaged in has been Twitter. At one point, I was quite a prolific Twitter user, but I've hardly been on it at all recently. I went on it today. Big mistake. I don't know if anybody's on Twitter at the moment, but there's a complete bin fire going on there at the moment. And I find that when I do go on there, I'm not doing anything productive on there. I'm just scrolling, occasionally being annoyed by things that I see. So for the last month, I haven't been on Twitter at all. And the amount of writing I got done was unbelievable, because what I tend to do with Twitter is, so I'll be writing. And then if I hit a sort of a difficult point, or I just think, I'll leave that and see what's happening on Twitter. And then I spend an hour scrolling through Twitter. I mean, it's just such a time suck, and for no productive reason. For me anyway, Chloe, because you're a content creator. I don't really create content for Twitter. I more consume other people's content. And most of the time it's a load of crap. So if you're just scrolling.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just thinking there, I was like, I wish I had your restraint, because
Me too.
I just find it really hard to get away from it once I've started. I agree with all the negative points. It's just there's so many people on there that are funny or just I enjoy. And I this is me who uses it for books and writing. I tried to stay away. Of course I read, the political stuff or whatever else is going on, but there is a corner of it. You can create the bubble, let's say, that you want to create, but then you have the danger that it's so addictive. That's how they make social media addictive. That's the whole point of it. But then you don't get any writing done, which is the downside. And yes, I think I need to take a leaf out of Elissa's book and actually do some writing rather than just scrolling Twitter and seeing what else everyone else is doing. Plus, I also think there are days where if I'm not writing and I'm looking at Twitter and I'm seeing people announcing book deals or their next exciting book or their book's doing brilliantly, I just then start to feel really guilty that I'm not writing. And I just start to think, God, this is not going to be me, because you're not actually writing, you're just on Twitter. So there is that side of it as well.
Also, so I was just thinking, it's valuable because what we do is quite a lonely profession. We are stuck at home. I work from home largely doing all my writing, and I could find that 3 days go past and I've gone nowhere, probably not even out of my house, which is not good. because I want to have experiences to be able to write about them. I mean, that's the whole point of being a writer, interacting with people. But I do think there's a side where some people actually get a lot out of social media because they are housebound, or they live abroad, or they live somewhere where it's very difficult for them to meet the author or reading community. And I think that is a very nice and sometimes underrated side of social media. It's connecting people. As long as you're in control of those connections, I think that is quite important.
And sticking with sort of positive things about social media, I do think it has made the publishing industry, for example, because that's the one we're interested in, more accessible. I mean, when I was younger, I'm not from any sort of publishing background, writing background, anything like that. I just wouldn't even have known. Let's say I did finish a novel, which I never did, but let's say I did finish a novel. I would have had no idea what came next. An agent, a publisher, where to go, who to send it to, nothing. Whereas now, if you look on Twitter, you can be scrolling for, best part of an hour, and you could come up with 3 or 4 agents who are interested in whatever it is you've written, or, who potentially could be interested. You can find other new writers that you can engage with, and you can find publishers who are open to submissions. You can find journals that are open. You can find competitions that you can enter. So these are all positive things. So I don't say there's nothing positive about social media, but in terms of how I use it, I don't really think that publishers require it.
I was going to say, you said more accessible, but also more accountable. It's making publishers more accountable. Because you think back to 30 years ago when authors were really totally isolated. We are now talking to each other. We're talking to each other in group forums, in private chats. We're connecting with people. There are places we can go if, say, I don't know, your agent isn't replying to your emails. Is this normal? Should I expect this from my agent? Even talking finances, which is obviously something we don't, that is our personal business. Is your publisher offering you a fair deal? Is that the going rate? It's things like that, I think, that social media has connected people and forced the industry to be more transparent. That is only a good thing for authors.
Yeah, I agree.
What can next go here? I've got a list. Let's see. Oh, actually, yeah, okay. What's the best reader or fan encounter you've had?
For me, one of my favourites, I've had some lovely encounters with readers and messages and things, but one of my favourites was a young woman from Australia who live Instagrammed, I suppose you would say, her experience of reading my book, and was taking photos of her face with tears running down it and passages of the novel where she'd highlighted. And then when she finished the book, she sent me a picture of her tear-stained face with her thumbs up. And I was just like, this is the best kind of response I could ever hope for. So yeah, I've saved that picture of her crying face with her thumbs up to my computer just to kind of remind me that there are people out there who really appreciate my work. And I would have to say as well, going to festivals and literary events is amazing. And if anyone gets the opportunity to go to them, even as a fan or a reader and not a writer, they are just the most wonderful experiences to be around people who have, who love books as much as you. But as a writer, to have people come up to you and say, oh, I loved your book and I stayed up till 3 a.m. Or there was one girl that showed me her sort of battered copy and said, I've got 80 pages left and I'm going to, as soon as this is over, I'm going to go and read them. And please don't tell me the ending and all that sort of stuff. And that's when it feels real. That's when it feels like, okay, my book has done something and moved someone in some way. And it's not just that thing that's living in my head or as a file on my computer. And that's what's the most special part, I think.
I wouldn't say there's a standout fan encounter for me, but it's just this wonderful feeling that these readers think I'm special when I really don't feel that I am. So I've been, for example, at a private party. It was a Ruby wedding anniversary, and some woman came up to me in the buffet queue and said, are you Jenni Keer? I've read your book and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, wow, that for me was really weird to be sort of recognised, because we're unlike other celebrities in inverted commas, we're not associated with our product. Like if you're a TV star, everybody knows what you look like because you act on Coronation Street or whatever. Even a musician, you would sort of know their face. And we have a kind of anonymity because really, you might see our inside of the cover of the book. We're not really known. So it's lovely to be at an event or like Chloe says at a book festival or something, and people, like I say, they make me feel like I'm special. They they feel intimidated. I can tell from their body language, and it's like, oh wow, you're Jenni Keer, and that is wonderful. But at the same time, I am just me, and it's very much this. Like, if I can do it, and I am just an ordinary mum of four, living in the middle of the Suffolk countryside. If I can do it, you can do it, and that feeling that they are somehow, in awe of me is wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful, but totally undeserved.
Well, I don't know. I disagree with that. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I don't have any fans apart from my mum. We can't really count her. So I completely misunderstood this question. I thought this question was, who have we seen, that we are fans of? So I'm just going to answer it like that. So I'll tell you, I don't know if you know, quite a famous Scottish author called Janice Galloway. I don't know if you know her. She's very highly critically acclaimed here in Scotland anyway. Her most famous novel is The Trick is to Keep Breathing. Anyway, highly recommend it if you haven't read it. So I was in Tesco Extra in Uddingston, and who did I see but Janice Galloway? And the only reason I know what she looks like is because I'd happened to be at a lecture that she was giving in Edinburgh on Muriel Spark a couple of weeks earlier, so I knew exactly who it was. So I went up to her and I said, hello. However, it all went downhill because did I say, I really love your writing? Did I say, you've been such an influence on me? No. I said, I read your short story collection. It's full of typos. And I don't know where that... I mean, it is full of typos, and she agreed with me. But why would I don't know why that was the first thing that I thought of to say. So then we had a sort of a conversation about copy editing and how to spot typos in your books. Nothing at all about how inspiring she is, how fantastic a writer she is. And then I just walked away.
Janice, if you're listening, Elissa really, really likes your books.
Her husband came over actually and said in a sort of a deadpan voice, "Is this a fan?" And I think she thought, probably not really.
Well, Elissa, in terms of you saying you don't have fans, I mean, I've had you on my podcast. I really liked your book. I know Chloe's had you on her podcast. I think she liked your book.
Yeah, I know. You've definitely got fans, Elissa. You've got, I don't know how many reviews. I can't go and check the number now, but there's definitely a fair few on there as well.
Oh, that's kind. And actually, there was the day that I was walking to Greg's for my cappuccino. And when I got to Uddingston Cross, somebody shouted out their car window, "I'm listening to Ginger and me on audio."
Oh, amazing. So there we go. You do have fans. In fact, my mum read your book and she really enjoyed it. So she's a fan.
Thank you. Oh, that's made my day, Chloe. That's lovely to know.
Jenny, have you read Ginger and Me?
I'm afraid I haven't, but I shall look it out.
I think you'd really enjoy it. So there you go, Lisa. There's 3 fans just here for you.
Oh, glad I came now.
So, okay, if you could have written somebody else's book, which book would you choose?
Wow, that is a hard question, but I don't know, I feel a bit mean trying to steal someone else's book now, but, well, actually, no, I'm going to change my mind now. I'm going to change my answer. There's a book that came out last year by Eliza Clark called Penance. I don't know whether anyone's read it.
No, I haven't, but I've heard of it.
It's, oh my goodness, it's incredible, because what I love about it is that it's kind of pretending to tell a true story, and you get snippets of girls' diaries that they've kept on Tumblr, online, and you get different versions of the same event, and it's about a horrific crime, but it's told as if it's true, and it's just amazingly constructed. And as I said, I don't think I could write a crime novel, but it wasn't a kind of whodunit. It was more just exploring the psychology of female friendship groups when they're kind of teenagers, and incredibly written. And I don't think I could ever have written it, but it's amazing. And it's one of those books where you read and you're like, maybe I should try writing a book like this. Then you think, oh no, it's too hard.
I wouldn't say there's any book I wish I'd written, because I wouldn't have written it the same, just by virtue of me being me and the author being them. I think I quite often read a book or see a book advertised, and the concept blows me away, and I sort of think, darn it, I wish I'd thought of that. And it can be, it's what we all search for, isn't it? It's that one line elevator pitch, that hook, that incredible what if kind of scenario. And as somebody who's always looking to subvert things and looking for a little something twisty-turny to put into my books, yeah, I do quite often think, oh, that's incredible, not a book, but for example, The Lake House, the film with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, all of these time travel twisty things that we've had in the history of fiction, and then to just have, what was it, a 2-year gap or something, was just genius. It's like, okay, she's not communicating with somebody from 100 years ago. She's communicating with somebody from 2 or 3 years ago. That is genius. That is so clever. And, obviously gives rise to, won't spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, but gives rise to some really interesting twists in the film. So it's more the concepts where I sort of think to myself, oh my gosh, I wish I'd thought of that. But then that sets my little author brain ticking. And then I start trying to subvert things around it and similar to it. And, it's been said many times, we are magpies. We look for the shiny things around us in the world and we bring them back to our nests. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're not copying other people, but things are sparking ideas. We're seeing things and we're thinking, what if? So there isn't a book that I wish I'd written, because that isn't how it works. Even if you gave me the synopsis for a book and asked me to go and write it, I would write a completely different novel. I just would, because even with the same framework, like you say, it's voice and humour and how we describe things in our prose. So yes, concepts for me.
I agree with you, Jenny. There isn't a book that I think that's the people asking, what is your favourite book, isn't it? And that for me changes over time and depending on how I'm feeling. So there isn't a specific book. You were saying it's for you, it's concepts. For me, it's if I read particularly good writing, I'm not really that bothered about I'm not bothered about what the plot is, but I don't find myself being sort of envious of a plot, but I find myself sometimes being envious of other writers' ability to articulate what it is that they're wanting to say. I'm particularly interested in reading about relationships, not just romantic, all sorts of relationships, just the way that we relate to each other, the conflicts, the tensions, the compromises. I just find that fascinating. So if I read prose where the author has really got inside the intricacies of a relationship and how things are working, I just think, oh, that's phenomenal. I wish I could do that.
What is the best writing advice you've ever been given?
Find your own voice. I'd written 2 novels before my debut, which I knew really weren't working. I couldn't really put my finger on why. And it's because, as we were saying at the start of this recording, I was trying to be somebody else. I was trying to write in the way that I was trying to tell stories that I thought should be written in a particular way. And it was only really when I started to write as myself in my own voice, which is, I would say, contemporary subject matter with a sort of a dark humour. Only when I started to do that did I achieve anything like authenticity. And that's because somebody said to me, look, you really need to find your own voice. And I've always carried that with me. And I do always think, is this unique to me? Is this my voice speaking here? And I think for any writer, it's not easy to find your own voice, and it probably won't come when you first start writing. You just have to keep writing and keep experimenting until you find it. And once you find it, use it.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't say that there's a best bit of advice. There's so much advice out there and so much of it that I've taken on board. But the one that springs to mind today, I think, is finish the book. Because I'm passionate about supporting emerging writers. I want to encourage people. I want people to persevere. I really want them to know that if you want it badly enough, you will get there in the end. And one of the things when I'm talking to aspiring authors that I see happen quite a lot, or they tell me it happens quite a lot, is the number of unfinished novels they've got when they're starting out. So they'll have shiny new idea. They will write 20,000 words. Oh, it's going to be amazing. We all have this vision of what the final book will be when we start out. And then it starts to get a bit sticky and things don't go quite how you planned. And the characters aren't doing what you want because you've got to be true to the characteristics that you set them up with to begin with. It all gets very, very difficult. And then what's that over there? Oh, that's a shiny new idea. Oh, let's go and start that shiny new idea because that's going to be so much better than the book I'm writing, and it's got a bit hard at 20,000 words. So I'll shelve that, open a new document, and I'll start a new book. And I'm really passionate about encouraging writers to finish that first book. Great, if you've got another idea, note some things down about it, start a little document so that you don't forget what you've got and come back to it. And yeah, that'll be bubbling away in your brain whilst you're writing the first one, but please finish that first book for so many reasons. I think it's quite common with authors. We get to the sticky middle, we want to abandon it. It's not turned out how we think it's going to look. I always think of those Pinterest pictures where, you're trying to emulate some fantastic wedding cake and it turns out like a lopsided sponge. We get to the point where we are writing with lopsided sponge. But if you keep going, you can add tears to it. You can ice it. It will look beautiful. And the whole process of finishing a book, of wrestling through these problems, of finding a plot problem that seems unsurmountable, but actually if you persevere, you can write round it, of learning how to edit, of having an ending, of tying everything up and having written 80 to 100,000 words with a beginning, middle and end, and then realising, rather disturbingly, that isn't the end because you've then got to go back and edit it and make it even better. I think that is such an invaluable learning curve. It's very unlikely to be the book that gets picked up by a publisher, which is awfully tragic because there's an element where you think, I've written all of that and no one's even going to buy it. But I think you need to finish a complete book because then you have learned so much from that process.
Jenny, can I just jump in there with a sort of a practical tip? I completely agree with you in what you're saying. A practical way that somebody told me, and it seems so obvious that probably everybody is already aware of it, but I certainly wasn't. I agree that when you're writing a novel and you come to this sticky plot point or you don't know what your characters are doing or whatever, the temptation is just to abandon it altogether and start something else. Somebody said to me that what to do then is just put in a placeholder. So let's say, you want your characters to get to a certain place and they have to be there by midnight and you don't know how to get them there, but you know what's going to happen after midnight. So put in the placeholder from here to midnight and then carry on after midnight. And then before you know it, you've got most of your novel with little gaps, and then you can go back and fill in those gaps.
Absolutely.
You don't have to write your novel chronologically, which is what I thought you had to do initially, which was why I had so many failed attempts.
I was just going to say that you don't have to write chronologically. And now I say finish the novel. I'm not dictating how you do that. And I'm not a chronological writer generally, but I try and write it chronologically if it makes sense. But like you say, if I'm really getting stuck, I'll jump ahead to a scene that's so much more fun to write, that I really know where I'm going with it. And if I need a massive chunk of research doing and I don't have the time or access to whatever I might need to research that particular section, yeah, absolutely agree with you, Elissa. Yeah.
My advice is just quite simple. Read your work aloud, particularly the dialogue, because that's where you'll hear sentences that don't sound quite right. You'll hear dialogue that just doesn't sound like natural dialogue. Sometimes I've read books where the name of the character is used often in the dialogue. So it'll be, "Hi Charlie, how are you today, Charlie? What did you hear about that? Did you hear about that drama down the road, Charlie?" And
I'm so guilty of that.
This is not a call out for you, Elissa, don't worry. But people don't use names in dialogue very often. And if you can avoid doing it, then it just sounds much more natural. I remember, I think it was, I had some advice where it said, we often use people's names if we want to persuade them something. That's often when we use it. Or I guess when we're probably unsure or want their help or something. But yeah, reading your work aloud helps massively. And I think when I heard my audiobook version of my novel was when it kind of came alive for me. But I think if there had been any dodgy parts to the novel where I thought, I would rewrite that again, the audiobook would have highlighted that for me, I think. And so I think if you can read it aloud before it gets to that point, you'll find the bits that just don't read as well. That would be my advice.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Chloe first, how much, etc., can you tell us about what you're writing at the moment? What might see the light of day, etc.?
Oh, difficult to say. As I said, I'm working on two different things. One of them is a rom-com. And yeah, it's new territory for me, but I'm really enjoying it. I have no idea when it will see the light of day, because I'm quite a slow writer, I have to say. But I have a fantastic agent who has foreseen lots of exciting things in the future. But I can't really say too much because I don't know what's going to happen in terms of what's going to stay, what's going to go, what's going to be bought, what's not going to be bought. All I can say is that there will be future books. I just can't tell you what they are yet.
That's the most important thing. Jenny, what are you writing at the moment?
I'm editing my October book. And just to give away a little bit about my age as well, I have got menopause brain. I'm absolutely really struggling. And this is when it's not fun. So I've written the book and I'm trying to do some structural edits. And I am spending 2 hours trying to sort one paragraph out. And I can't do that. I don't have the time to do that. It's just proving really, really tricky. So, you know, a little bit of witchcraft and some gothic vibes thrown in there, set in the 1880s. But let's just hope that the brain fog has cleared quite quickly to enable me to actually polish it as I would wish.
I'm kind of glad you said that, because I think that's important information to get that out there for people, isn't it? Elisa, how is Graffiti Girls?
It's out on the 7th of November.
Hey.
So it's a novel about 4 women who hit their 40s. In fact, you might relate to this, Jenny. Well, as you can see from my face, I also relate to it. 4 women who hit their 40s and they've been lifelong friends. And they realise when they look around them that actually life is not as great as we were promised when we were at school for women in their 40s and older. And so they decide to embark upon a graffiti campaign in their local town where they graffiti anti-patriarchy slogans all over the walls to draw attention to these issues that are annoying them. So that's my second novel. And then my third novel, which I wrote in 6 weeks quite easily. No, I'm just kidding, Jenny.
You made me die. You made me die when you said that.
Oh, you had me there.
Only took me 4. I'm just kidding. No. Last week I submitted it to my publisher, so I'm highly delighted about that. And it's in the same sort of world as Ginger and Me. In fact, you can tell your mum, Chloe, that Wendy makes a wee guest appearance. And it's really a sort of a love letter to the lonely, the lovelorn, the misfits of this world. And all the action takes place on allotments round and about Uddingston. So that is due out the following year, or next year it is now, next November. So yeah, busy.
Wonderful. Thank you all listeners for listening to us, and Elisa, Jenny and Chloe, this has been an absolute pleasure having you back on the podcast here today. It has been lovely. I'm really glad you all said yes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks,
I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great chat.
The Wormhole Podcast Milestone Episode 3 was recorded on the 7th of March and published on the 15th of July 2024. Music and production by Charlie Place.